All right, greetings and salutations, beautiful human beings. I'm so glad you came into the space today. I feel like Jay-Z, you could have been anywhere in the world, but you chose to be here today. So I'm grateful for you. And maybe if you don't have a passport, you really didn't have as many choices. And so you would have had to be here. So today, I'm super excited because we started out this journey regarding the community engagements and having small group dialogues, right? And the wonderful thing about small group dialogues is that you get to kind of go a little bit deeper with a small group of people. You don't have to feel like you're having a conversation with 50 or 70 people in the room. The challenge with that, though, is the room as a whole doesn't get blessed with the details of the conversations that you learn from hearing people's stories. So today, as we're learning more, gleaning more from the stories that have been shared, information, feedback that has been shared from folks, we wanted to use a different format. So today we're using something that's kind of like a hybrid of a story lab and a fishbowl. Because we are recording some of the stories, we couldn't do a pure fishbowl. If it was a pure fishbowl, we would all be in a circle completely around them, and they would be in a circle with each other. And this would be terrible for our beautiful videographers. So shout out to the videographers who are capturing these stories and making sure that these narratives live in perpetuity to tell the tales of the people who are here in our city. So with that, we're going to start with hearing a little bit. I'm going to give an intro question, but I've told them that they don't have to answer that specifically because it does sound a little bit like if a hippie was conducting an SAT. And so they know they don't have to answer it purely. So you're going to see them share a little bit about their story, their culture. And then the next part is what's unique about today's conversation is then they're going to have a conversation with each other that I'm going to facilitate. And we're going to watch how they navigate talking about culture and community. And then at the end, so please note and notice what you are curious about, what is of interest to you, what you long to learn more about in their stories, because the last portion of today, then we're going to invite everyone in the room to be part of the conversation. Yes? So this means you are not purely observing. Got it? Okay. All right. So I'm going to go ahead and jump in because honestly, I'm glad y'all are here, but I've been waiting for weeks to hear these folks' stories. So we'll just start this way. And then that way the mic can kind of navigate as it were. And then we're going to start with Marc, and you have the floor. The question that I'm posing to everyone, in addition to how they introduce themselves and how we frame this conversation, and we'll go into more details later about why I'm asking the questions that I'm asking. But the question that I have for them is, how would your grandparents' grandparents hope you were experiencing their culture? So for those of you who are sitting in the audience, think about it. You have to have grandparents, or you just wouldn't be here, right? And thinking about how we now know they may have identified culturally, and even that has shifted over the years through their heritage, their culture. And we have some poster boards here to understand how are we defining culture and heritage, right? But through that lens, how might you imagine they would hope that in 2024, you would be experiencing something that was a very tangible, very real, maybe very different kind of experience for them. And again, so that is the question. But if you want to be like, I don't like that, Kim, I want to just say this. We welcome that as well. Marc, the floor is yours.
Thank you. Thanks for including me here tonight. My name's Marc. Thanks for including me here tonight. My grandparents' grandparents would have been from southern Italy, so Calabria and Naples. But at that time, there was no Italy as we know it today. So it would be really interesting to understand from them what of their culture, how much of it was different from when they lived and what I'm guessing the late 1800s versus what we know of Italy today and its culture. And in fact, I think at that time, where my both sets of grandparents were from, I think it was part of the two kingdoms of Sicily. So it really just kind of opens up a lot of thought about what exactly would they be enjoying about the culture and want to see continue today. The simple answer is my guess would be, faith and family and food, and which tend to be the three things probably for almost any culture.
Also, who are you? Because you're representing them, right? So share a little bit about who you are.
I grew up in suburban Cleveland. Came here for college, 36 years ago, never left, which I know is a common thing for a lot of people who live in Columbus. My mother was really active in the Italian American Club up in Cleveland. And in fact, one year in high school, I was Christopher Columbus in the Columbus Day Parade. I hope there's no video of that, but because I don't think the outfit was very good, but that's a whole nother matter. But my grandmother was really the only grandparent I did know who still lived in the same house that she lived in when she got to Cleveland. Never learned to drive, would take the bus to the West Side Market to do her shopping. And the other interesting thing I think about my background with that is her first child, so my aunt, she had in Italy and stayed there in Italy with her while my grandfather moved to the United States. And then 13 years later, my grandmother came over and had my mom. So there's this big age gap, a lot of which is due to the immigration pattern of that time.
Next, we have Shelly.
Hamadakabi, Chante Washte Nape Chahuzabi, Takoni Koki Peshni Imachabi, Grove City Elwati, Eagle View Emataha, Itazucho Namini Koshu, Tioshbae, Ina, Sherry Redout, Na Ate, Sheldon Yellowhead Ichiapi. My name is Shelly Corbin, and I am Lakota. I'm from the Itazucho Minikoju families, and I grew up in Eagle Butte, South Dakota on the Cheyenne River Reservation. And then I currently live in Grove City, the greater Columbus area. And as far as what I see and what I feel is, and in this event tonight, it definitely is important for storytelling. It's important because today there's so much disconnection in our culture and really like a lack of community. And so from the perspective of, my lived perspective as it relates to growing up on a reservation and then my life experiences, I will be sharing tonight basically through my lived perspectives, answering the questions, being in dialogue with you all. And as far as my grandparents, on my grandmother's side, there would be two sides. So my grandmother is half Dene, which is Navajo, and half Lakota. And we don't know much about the Dene side because of the boarding schools. So what I do know is her mom, my grandmother's mother, was taken in the early 1900s. So it'd be 1910 to 1920, removed from her family at the young age of 8 years old, and traveled from the Dene land to present day South Dakota, where she attended and was assimilated into the United States government. With the respect to, and that's pretty much what we know about her. She married my great grandfather, and they had, by way of my grandparents, my grandmother. On my grandmother's side, a little bit further back, on her father's side, that grandparent would be Jenny on the Lead. Jenny on the Lead was a survivor of the Wounded Knee Massacre. And she was she actually lost her husband that day. So Wounded Knee Massacre happened at the end of the last century. And really, she, from the story that I was was passed down for me was when the camp was raided on, it would be December 29th. She fled with a baby on her back on a cradle board and a 6-year-old daughter. And she fled into the creek north of Little Wounded area. And they camped along the creek. So they basically ran into the creek. And she felt as she was running, or even on horseback, because there's 2 stories, she felt a thud hit her back. And she didn't find out later, but when she arrived somewhere in the Badlands, she took off her baby and her baby was dead. It was shot. So she buried her baby in the Badlands, and it was starting to snow. So it wasn't snowing, and it started to snow. It's starting to blizzard, and she continued on the north and following the waterways all the way into present day, where it'd be Cheyenne River, a community called Cherry Creek. And there, when she got there, her 6-year-old daughter had died from what we believe maybe like pneumonia, just like from being exposed to the cold weather, not having shelter, traveling. And she was all alone. And like, I think about that and I'm like, wow, like this woman had so much strength. I mean, to keep living, to persevere, right? Like her whole community was like massacred. That's where I come from. And I normally don't get emotional talking about it, actually. And so, because we talk about these things so much in our community, and it's so beautiful to have those stories that are passed down, because then you realize that like we are so strong and so resilient, and a people that survived terrible things, and we're still here practicing culture, looking to create connections and still maintaining our spirituality, which is all land-based. And so that is a little bit about my perspective and what you will get from me tonight.
Thank you, Shelly. And next we have Swid.
Hi, everyone. So I'm Swid. I've been in Columbus about 10 years. I grew up in a small town in Northeast Ohio, just across from the Cuyahoga Valley National Park. Probably didn't realize as a child what an absolute treasure that was, but we now have bike lanes on my street back home, and the connections to the trails are ever expanding, so I certainly enjoy that now. Culturally, my mother and her family are from the Bavarian region in Germany. The whole extended family is still on another continent. My mother, her parents, they've all died, so the connection to the extended family and to that culture is still there in Germany. My father's side, I'm Italian-Ukrainian, and the Italian is much more known. I know that we're a relative to Antonio Meucci, who is the original inventor of the telephone. The history books haven't all been corrected, but my uncle had gone on a great journey to have it published in some books and worked with cousins in Italy. And I would say that informally or in our family in Ohio, there's a lot of rich connection to food. A lot of cheese, a lot of talking with hands, a lot of loud. And I know I talked about this in the first gathering, the first reimagining in the table conversations, that is a lot of what is shared in our culture, is this experience of family as community from both my Ukrainian and my Italian grandparents. They had many children. My grandfather was one of 10. And they each had many children. My father is one of 6. And so that continued. My grandmother, now 99, my nonna, just loves to be surrounded by her children, her children's children, every generation, to be there together and to continue that feeling of family and community and that richness of celebrating together and sharing emotions together. So a lot of that continues on. What they would think about my experience, my ancestors and my experience now of our culture. There were immigrants, of course. I'm second generation American. So that journey, that courage to leave behind, to seek better, to want to change your environment and be a part of something new. I think that they would feel that I'm really experiencing that. I moved away. I lived away. I have no spouse and no children by choice. So some of that adventure, although it was different from what they had nurtured, I think it embodies a lot of the same kind of values, a lot of the same spirit of what they wanted to carry on or what they wanted to perpetuate in the choices that they made in their own journeys. And I guess I would also just add for the German family, there's a lot of that culture continued. I was just telling Mama Gigi that some of the words my mother had used growing up, it was very deliberate not to teach German, but there was German language infused. And so there were some words that I was using, especially describing things for like little kids or for babies or dogs, that I didn't realize until I was a grown-up that they were not English words. And so sometimes I also have a strange accent because my mother would speak sometimes sort of with a German accent, even though we weren't speaking German to each other. And the same sort of connections on the other parts of the family to the idea of, how we celebrate, the foods we use. My mom kept a lot of that going, even though her parents were very much like, we are American. They wanted to be very accepted as American, and they had a lot of very specific expressions of what it was to be American. My mom was very much nurturing the idea of family as community and that love of family, and continuing some of the traditions of food and celebration as a family.
Thank you for that, Swid. Next, we have Mama Gigi. And she does have a real name. But I will only ever in life and in the next one call you Mama Gigi. I'm just saying. Floor is yours.
My name is Gwendolyn Ann Pinnell Bradford Gardener. I'm a resident of, I'm from West Virginia, in the coal mines of West Virginia. The vision of my family, we went to Charleston, West Virginia, and most of my young age was in segregated community, but we thrived. I have 2 children, a son and a daughter. I have 4 grandchildren, and I'm soon to be a great-grandmother. So in the next couple of days, or even I have to leave here and go help out, I'll be doing that. We have an interesting story. My grandmother, on my dad's side, was born in 1800s, so she was part of the slavery, but she never really talked about it. She said it was just a situation, and she had to figure out how we could best live in that situation. And my mom was a visionary. She came from West Virginia. She had 7 brothers, and she was the only girl. And my father came from a family, and my grandmother, I have a picture of my grandmother here. That's my father's mother. And she was born in 1895. And she had 4 children, and she died in 1966. But our family always had an elder in the house, and so they always told the stories and guided you through that. We also were given names of our ancestors so that we would know who we are and who they were, and so you kept that going. Your name meant something, and you had a responsibility with that name. We were in West Virginia, and in West Virginia at that time, we were in the coal mining towns where, what's the basketball player's name? He lived in Cabin Creek. It was a coal mining town.
I mean, hold it closer.
Oh, and my dad was not a big man, but he was smart, and he only went to the 3rd grade. But he decided that he could memorize things. and I can remember things. So he memorized the Bible and he learned how to pray. So he was involved with the church because he would always open up the church with a prayer and praying for people till the minister got there. And he also said that when women were there.
Let me hold it for you.
Yeah, that way you can talk with
Yeah, you can talk with your hands.
That's okay.
Yeah.
So he memorized the Bible, even though he only went to the 3rd grade. And he was attracted to my mom because she was beautiful and she was smart. She went to school and she had brothers and their parents, her mom. So when I was born, it was 3 of us born in the coal mines. After I was born, my mom said to my dad, "What are we going to do with 3 girls in a coal mine? Get married and have babies?" I don't think so. So they didn't get paid in the coal mines. You got scrip. And the story they had, you get "Oh my soul" to the company store because they never had any cash money and they never got paid with money. You could go to the company store and buy whatever you wanted to buy. So my dad didn't, from what I understand, my dad never responded to my mother about what we were going to do with 3 girls. But he figured out which finger he didn't need because you got insurance. If you got injured, you got some kind of money compensated for losing. So he figured out which finger he needed. And he didn't, he said the middle, this is just a pointing finger. So he decided this was the finger that you pick up with and it could be useful. So he laid his hands on on the track and had somebody roll the car across his finger. And this is how we got money to get out of the Cabin Creek. So we left there and went to West Virginia. So it's always respected my father. My mother always respected me, but they grew. My mom was always, we didn't move to a lot of different places, but she knew when we had to move. You know, when we moved to West Virginia, we stayed in the community. We never lived in the projects. We just had always a house. She made herself a housekeeper, but she was domestic, but she was the housekeeper. So she took care of the house and she learned a lot of things by being in the housekeeper. So the people in our community were teachers and doctors because everybody Black lived in the community, so you need them. So you saw them every day, and the teachers in our school were all Black, and so Christopher Columbus didn't mean nothing to us. We knew the story behind him, so we didn't bother with all the things that were going on. Or as children, we weren't, we just didn't. We learned Paula Dunbar. We learned to speak in the dialect. We could. We learned the scripture. The church was a social gathering for children. We learned how to eat. We learned how to dress. I know every spiritual song in the world. I don't belong to one church. I didn't do too well with that because I couldn't follow orders. So I don't belong to social organizations because I just don't do well with that. Because if you tell me to be somewhere at 9, I'll be there at 9:15 just because you told me to be there at 9. So we were, but my mom, we left, we stayed in West Virginia till we were in Charleston, and my dad and them owned a pharmacy. And in the pharmacies years ago, they used to have those concessions in there where you could go get milkshakes and hot dogs and stuff in the thing. So they ran that. And my dad bought a car, and then he bought from the Jewish people in the community, they were always selling stuff. So my dad bought the nut brown makeup, and stockings and all that, and he took it back to the coal mines and sold it to our friends and family. Then we left, we went to school, George Washington Carver School. I never had a white teacher at all. I had no idea. It was insignificant, even though they were in West Virginia and we seen them, but nobody ever came to our house to collect nothing or do nothing. Then my mom was the kind of person, whatever she promised you, that's what she did. If it was like a spanking, you got it. And she didn't talk a lot. She just told you, she didn't say we couldn't do this or we couldn't do that. She used to tell us the consequences if you did it. So it made you think, am I going to stay out till 12:30 instead of 12? Because she had said, I have to go to work the next morning and I can't rest unless you're home. And that's just why you have to be home at 12. And anything after 12, you don't have no business out there anyway. So you learn to respect that, and you always had to think, because if you asked next week to go somewhere, she would say you can't go because you don't know how to tell time. And so then you had to think about, what you are you going to deal with the consequences, or are you going to come home, like she said, or go whatever she told you. Then we moved when I was 12. I think it was enough of West Virginia because she always wanted us to keep moving. And we went to Chicago, and she got a job with one of her friends that was a domestic worker. And we lived in Hyde Park, the University of Chicago. And she got a job with a family, and they had children. She always made sure they had children our age and size, and mostly girls, because it was 3 of us. And so when we moved to Chicago, she thought Al Capone was still there. So we all used to just move as a group. She had my older sister and us. We would walk together, and then we were restricted as to where we were going, but she didn't say that. You just do what she told you. And I went to the University of Lab School at the University of Chicago with a domestic family that she worked for, because my mom said she knew nothing about Chicago. And so we had to stay in their guest house in the coach house in the back. And so I went to get in the limousine, come and take us to the school. And then I found out that the young lady, the young girl that was my age, that we lived in a coach house, and she lived in the thing, and my mom was caring for her like she was caring for us. And she wasn't that smart after all. I thought she was real smart because she went to the thing. It wasn't nothing, you know. So after that, I grew up. I went to school at the University of Cook County Hospital. I'm in the medical field. And, you just move around, and people pick up your vibrations, and they share things with you and have you here and there you don't know how to do. But we always were taught to be respectful and respect people's differences, and make sure you kept yours in contact. You didn't have to change to be with people or do whatever everybody did. I think my last whipping was because I said I did this because she told me, or they were doing it, and that was a no-no. And so was saying, if you did it on your own, that's fine. But if you did it because someone else said to do it, that wasn't too smart to do. So we came to Columbus we went to Chicago when I was 12. We left West Virginia and went to Chicago when I was 12 because my mom had a friend that moved from West Virginia to Chicago, and she got a job. And so we went there. And we went on a Greyhound bus. And, we had everybody black know about the box lunch. You had the chicken, the fried chicken, the pound cake, and the lemonade and the Kool-Aid all in this box. And we sit in the back of the bus, and I thought we were sitting in the back. My mother told me the reason we were sitting in the back of the bus because they had the long seat there, and so I could just stretch out. I didn't know that we had to sit in the back of the bus. And then she had these mason jars with, lemonade and your fried chicken. And I would look out the window and I said, well, can we go to the bathroom? She said, no. She said, oh, it's dirty. You don't want to do that. Then we saw the fountains that said, for colored and white. She said, oh, we had the real lemonade, the real lemonade with the real lemon in it. So we had it in a mason jar. We drove it. So it didn't resonate with me why we couldn't do it. I just saw the signs. And when we went to Chicago, I went to the school, Hyde Park High School, where mostly a Jewish school, and I hadn't seen that many white folks in my life. And I go like, who are they, and what are they doing, and what am I doing? But I was a good athlete, so I ran track. I played basketball because they had all these facilities at the school. I learned most of the things just by knowing. Things just come to you. You can grasp things and do that. And then after I got married to Bradford, they were Native American Indians, and they were orphanages in Oklahoma, and they came to Chicago and was domestic, whatever. But my mother-in-law was beautiful, and she in the years before, when you were in the orphanage, they taught you how to cut hair or be a cosmetologist. Cosmetologist, yeah. So she was good at that. And so she was in Chicago, and she did hair. And at the Regal Theater in Chicago, where all the Black artists used to come to, she would do their hair. And so she got to, become an entrepreneur, which I didn't know what that was at that particular time. So now we're here in Columbus, making the same decisions, but we always did generational living. So there was always a elder in the house that set the tone and gave me the opportunity, being a young mother, to continue to be young and grow, because my mom set the tone of what was going to go in and out the house. And I think as a young mother, have an adult in the house, it protects you and makes your home safe. And somebody has some money in the house, you know, so you never really have to wonder if somebody had the money. So you didn't have that worry about it. And whatever she said, it wasn't worth you complaining about it, because when you came home, your children had the homework done, clothes was washed, food was in the refrigerator, was teaching, so you didn't have that struggle that a lot of people have. So I'm a advocate of generational living. And
Wait, don't give up any more, because the next part is going to be talking about how you're experiencing community. There's a question coming up, and I think you were about to go into, and I don't want you to reveal the juice.
Okay.
Okay.
Well, we'll stop in Columbus.
To be continued, there's an ellipse.
Exactly.
Thank you, Mama Gigi. And now we have Lisa Marie.
Hello, my name is Lisa Marie Rojas. I go by Lisa or Lisa Marie. I'm Kim's sister. I'm her little sister. Born and raised in Columbus, Ohio. Went to many different schools, moved around quite a bit, seen a lot, but I'm here because I feel like I might have a lot to offer, but there's a whole lot more for me to learn. I love to learn. I love to listen. I love to gain perspective on things. And as far as the grandmother's grandmother, so interesting in my background where I don't know much on my father's side with purpose. For whatever reason, I'm what's called a I'm what's called a Kokolaw. And for some odd reason, the Kokolaws kept family secrets. And we're discovering, I think it had a lot to do with race. There was a lot of mixing in the South back in those days that were taboo. And what made it even more interesting is that a lot of the children that were biracial came out as what's called passing, which means they were fair-skinned with light eyes, light hair. And what they were finding out is that they were getting into circles, being revealed and exposed to the truths of what white people thought about Black people. So that was completely closed off from us on purpose from generation to generation. And then, and that's my father's side. And we're just now finding out about a lot of that. And then on my mother's side, we're finding out a whole lot as well. We were spoon-fed stuff. We're digging out more. And what I gather from what the reflection from then to now, I feel like that they would want empowerment, which is how I think I live, especially as a Black woman. I have 3 children. I have a 25-year-old son, 19-year-old son, both finished school. I have a 16-year-old, well, she's going to be 16 in 2 weeks. She's going on 30, daughter. Her eyelashes are in my car. I have been through, my oldest child is a biracial child. His father was white. God rest his soul. He died at 28, about 10, 11 years ago, Travis died. God rest his soul. And then I married again, and I married an indigenous Mexican Aztec. And I have 2 Chicano children. Those are the 19 and 16-year-old. And we suffered a deportation from that. However, I think that the beautiful part in him being deported, he is no longer here in America, he's down there. It afforded a wonderful opportunity for my children to be forced to go down to Mexico to live with him and understand their heritage and experience what I didn't. I keep touching it. I'm sorry. Apologize. I wanted to do for my children what wasn't done for me as far as the secrets and spoon feeding of history. I purposefully make sure that my children understand their history. The deceased father's that son, he understands his history with the grandmother, and then my children know their history with their father as I'm understanding my history. And in all that said, after everything that I've been through, I still feel like that I'm empowered to have choices and make choices. I run my house, I govern my house, I work, I'm able to provide for them. I think that was kind of the message. I think a lot of those secrets were for that reason, because I think there were things that they knew that they will hold us back. And if you implant that seed in somebody and let them think that they're going to be held back, they will. And I think that's purposefully why the Kokolov grandmother specifically wanted to do that. She wanted to break barriers by not letting us know what real people thought of us, because you will position yourself out of fear. And they were a fearless bunch. And in a weird way, I don't know if grandma did that for us as well, but she was a strong woman, and she raised us to be strong women. I'm trying to find a balance and make sure that I'm still in my femininity for my daughter, because it's hard shifting with, from 2 boys to a girl. But I try to live in empowerment, but with respect, and to learn and to listen. Even if we don't agree, I still want to hear and know. And that's where I stand.
We should note, just in case anyone in the audience knows me, we do not have the same father. So in case you're wondering why we don't look alike, that's why. Okay. So this next part, and I know if y'all can believe it, it's 7:00. That was fast. So I want to spend some time with y'all in conversation with each other. Although I planned out 4 questions, they are meaty. So I won't be surprised if we actually answer 1. Okay. So I'm going to give us a really meaty one. So it's interesting and fascinating. And actually, can we just take a second, and I just want to pause and let everyone just inhale really deeply and then blow it out like you're blowing out a candle. When you all were sharing stories of your people, I felt full, because they're in the space when you talk about them, like they're in the room, right? And I just want to honor their presence and all the people that we're connected to, because it's just not possible to have people in the room without knowing that there is someone else on whose shoulders you stand. Someone went through a thing that you might never be able to fathom or imagine, so that you could be here and live however, whatever kind of life you choose to live. And we're experiencing some form of community that, regardless of perspective, none of our ancestors had whatever kind of community experience we're experiencing. Good, bad, or indifferent. This is not what life looked like. This room, in fact, is an anomaly for someone 100, 200, 3 years ago. They would have never imagined we'd have a room like this, and honoring the different perspectives of these kinds of stories in an equitable way. So one of the patterns that's been showing up in some of our conversations in community has really been, and you actually used the word, but the word is fear. People haven't been using the word fear, but what I've been sensing is fear. What happens if we do? What happens if we don't? What does this mean? Right? And so that's the reason why a lot of these conversations have been designed to be about more than just a statue. The statue is a representation, but it's what it means to people, which is why there is so much conflict about this topic. So what I would like for us to talk about, and I want to show people this, but I want to give a couple different ways for us to have this conversation. The other thing, I'll put it this way. The other thing that's showing up in a lot of the conversations, whether the word is used or not, is trauma. There's this phraseology, epigenetic trauma, generational trauma, right? Things that we experience. Like, Mark, when I'm hearing your story, I'm like, yo, you got an ancestor, and they're like, what's Italy? Right? When you were telling your story, Shelly, I was just like, oh my God. You're like, oh my God. And someone lived past that. And you sit in this seat as the future, the legacy of someone who probably didn't imagine surviving those moments, right? Swid, you talk about like, we went through I'm carrying language, and I didn't even know that I'm carrying language that probably in some place in space and time was not allowed to be spoken in certain places. I'm thinking about your father, Mama Gigi, and like, he literally sacrificed his body, you know, so that y'all could have a life that looks different, like thinking about provision in a different kind of way. Lisa, I know your story, so I'm cheating a little bit, but I know what you have to sacrifice in a multicultural household to make sure what you give up to make sure that they know this part of their heritage, and some complicated elements even of that when we come from multicultural families, right? And so I want to lift up that like fear and trauma is in the room when we've been having these conversations, big time, big time, big time. So I just want to call a thing so that we can have the conversation for real. And one of the things I want to put in the room before I ask this conversation is, in trauma, epigenetic trauma, when we get into survival mode, and one of the first questions we would ask in the World Cafes was about colonization. More than 80% of the planet has been impacted by colonization, whether you were coming from a nation that colonized or whether it was your country that was colonized. And there's not a single soul, you know, in this semicircle who was not impacted by that in some kind of way, which means that in some way, someone we're connected to had to survive something to survive. When you get into survival mode, even neurologically, something kicks in that you can't control. We always hear about fight or flight, but there's fight, flight. There's also freeze. There's also fawn. There's also flock. We talk about it individually, but one of the things I've been thinking about culturally is what happens as cultures when we get into the 5Fs, when the whole culture fights to survive, when the whole culture, in order to survive, has to flee, when the whole culture, in a way to survive, freezes, right? Which might look like going silent. What happens when the whole culture, in order to survive, has to fawn? Fawning means to give in or give up to survive. And there have been cultures where in order to survive, they had to give in or give up something. And then flocking is when we only survive if the whole group is in. Whatever we got to do as the whole group. So when thinking about this and thinking about like what we carry, one of the things that I'm curious about and would just like to hear y'all have a conversation about this, because I've heard some of these phrases come up. And I know it's fear and it's trauma. There are folks frustrated about how we talk about history. It was a long time ago. You know, why are we still talking about that? Why is it still important? Why are we living in the past? Why can't we get over things? And I'd like for y'all to have a conversation about how you feel or how you would respond to the idea that that is coming up in some of the conversations through your cultural lenses. And I'm going to actually give the mic so whoever starts, but I don't talk with me and don't talk with the audience. Talk with each other.
You know, one thing that comes to mind with the whole fear aspect is, you know, in Columbus, specifically our city, so much has been demolished, you know, ever since the city was first founded by the, you know, in modern times as Franklinton. And then, you know, it's a region that keeps building and growing. And so I think part of where maybe fear might be coming in, I don't want to pretend to speak for all the people who have been coming to these meetings. But I think part of what, because I feel that with some aspects too of our society and culture, is the so much has been lost. Like I think about, we have a neighborhood cut Italian village, but there's really no Italian enclave there. There was a huge Italian population and in the small part of San Margarita in Columbus, but there's really no enclave. And growing up in suburban Cleveland, at least up and through the end of the 20th century, there still seemed to be these ethnic enclaves more so than we found in Columbus. But Columbus has always been a newer city. And now we're seeing it with new immigrants, with folks like from Ethiopia, Somalia, Eritrea. We're seeing it with them. And so I think with this disappearance first, or temporary disappearance of the Christopher Columbus statue, I think people, the fear might be coming from they're losing their anchors. They already lose it, thinking about just some more mundane stuff. When I got to Columbus, there was Northland, Eastland, and Westland malls. Those are gone. Like, our landscape keeps changing. And so you want something you can grab onto that'll be there for a while. And now the statue is gone, where maybe somebody took pride in that. And so I think if we could come up with ways to elevate things we do want to celebrate, celebrate Italian Americans who did make their mark on the city. And then I think about even with indigenous cultures, we have Mound Street downtown. Well, the mound that was there was destroyed. So we do have this history in this town of destroying a lot of things. And so I think we need to create the things we can actually anchor ourselves to, and not lose tradition and history.
Well, the truth has to be told, honestly. And then when we came to Columbus, it was really just Black people and white people, and Appalachia, whatever it is to do. So we didn't have all these different nationalities here, whatever it is to do. And then change brings about change within the Near East Side was where the Black people migrated from wherever they came to Columbus, because that was on the way to Chicago or Detroit, and they were following work. And so a lot of people came and they stopped, and you had the Air Force Base here. So that brought people to do. But what we haven't really done is learn how to respect differences. We just have a group here and a group here, and even in the workplace, in living, gentrification, all of those things. And we're not really telling the truth about what Christopher Columbus' role is. So let's say he was insignificant to me. I heard of it, but it didn't give me no kind of feeling whatever it is, because it wasn't there, because I had other images that gave me the sense of who I was and where I was. And then they haven't been fair and equal in housing and schooling. We didn't ask to integrate. We asked for equality. We wanted teachers that could teach, in books that we could have, in a building that you could be in. It makes absolutely no sense in 2024 our schools don't have air conditioning. It's ridiculous. And then it's mainly our schools in the thing. Then they moved, and then they made the redlining and separate people together. So Columbus is, the fear in Columbus now is the coming together. And that old regime is what, it's got to find, share or get up and get out the way,
Yeah, I think to get back to your point, Mark, is I definitely agree that from what I see in terms of fear, is like the fear is change. Like, a lot of the culture, everybody is really rooted in wanting to grasp at anything that supports their identity or even supports the life, right? And from an Indigenous perspective, that life, it looks like extraction of resources, right? Extraction of the land, and in terms of the Indigenous community that I have connections with, it's extraction to gain control, to build power. And, and that's really what our society and our current culture is modeled after. You have rules and government and structure that ultimately then dictates, how and what and how you show up, what you do, in terms of, everybody's essentially in this room has to work to live. There is no alternative pathway towards, what freedom could look like. And so I think in these times, we're all essentially, it feels like we're fighting each other for identity, for contextual identity, so that we can stay relevant, or we can support what it is that culture and society then tells us that who we are. So I think that there's like an external identity crisis there. And in the indigenous way of thinking, which is what I teach my children is, and within our family, is that we build relationships with the living world, with the land, with the plants, with the trees, because we are a people that we are landless. Like, we don't own the land because the land is living. It's something that can't be owned. But from the perspective of culture and society now, that is what is owned, right? That is what, I mean, the United States government is really founded on, is property. And so when you apply that to everyone here, like, everybody owns things. Everything becomes tangible, becomes a thing. And people are then separated from what we consider our connections that ultimately give life. And that's all perpetuated by language. And it's really this disconnection with, like, the language, which is, I mean, English, which we talk in. The language naturally is disconnection, because we all individually have these meanings. So we really kind of talk around each other, because we have to interpret from our own lens and perspective of what it is that dictates the meaning and the life experience that you're giving to words. In community and indigenous culture and indigenous structure, words, like, there's no word for love. And I was actually having this conversation with Lisa. It's an act. It's like a lived experience that you get to have and experience and walk through that is meaningful. Like, you have to experience it. It's not a book that you just read with language that you then put in your mind. It's actually like an in-person experience. It's like ceremony. It's like eating with your friends and, going and walking through life. And so many times we are right now currently experiencing life via, like, these transactional, like, lived experiences. We read books when we should be telling each other stories like this in person, in community, which then strengthens your relationships. It builds these tethers that then ground you. And so from my perspective, that fear of what, to answer your question, is really shows up because of culture and society. And then the further disconnection of that is the language that we use. And so if we can tell more stories, and if we can be in community spaces more and share our perspective more, I do believe, like Marc said, and like, majority of us here, like, we can create relationships, we can create unified movements that then, can bring us into the future of what we would like to create together and build the world that we do want our children and we do want to live in. And I look forward to doing that all with you guys.
I want to pull in Swid and Lisa. Any thoughts about, again, what's showing up? Anything that's coming up for you? And remember, y'all aren't talking to me. Y'all are talking to each other. Whatever thoughts you're thinking about, anything someone has shared, or about fear, about, and again, some of this showed up as like, why are we still talking about this? Or let it go, or leave the past behind, or, these kinds of things. So I wanted to pull you.
Okay, I could pick a little at the idea that the past is in the past, that it's not present or future, because I disagree with that. And I want to think about this in the context of this process too, a little bit about what our imagination is limited to because of the things, because of the trauma, because of what we've been socialized to believe that creativity looks like. It's hard to imagine or to explore in that way. So maybe thinking of creativity differently, like, there is no product. It is the culture, and it is the social infrastructure. It's the relationships. But all of that requires acknowledging that the past is here with us present. The past will be with us future, because what we're imagining is based on those lived experiences. And that all comes from some place. That is the legacy of what those lived experiences have been across generations and what has been handed down that is with you each now. So I would say that it is wrong. It neglects a really important part of and denies a lot of people's lived experience to say, like, no, that hurt from the past. No, that doesn't exist. Or no, that's not here with us now.
I think everybody's pretty much touched on a lot of it. What I feel shows up a lot as far as the fear, is about connection. I think a lot of it has to do with being forgotten. It's about pride. It's about strength. It's about, whose characteristics are better or stronger or demonstrative of what elevates your community. And somewhere it got lost in translation where I don't know the disconnect or what happened where, people aren't able to partake in their space or respect each other. I think it's like a fallback. I purposefully sent my kids down to Mexico as a way for them to have something to fall back on at the very bare bones. Should anything happen, they have somewhere to go, or at least they know what to do. I'm wondering if people are in fear of being forgotten or being dismissed or losing something, so you fight to keep something. I think a lot of people aren't even sure what they're fighting for. I think they want to fight for attention and to be heard, but then when you give it to them, they don't know what to do with it. There's a lot of conflict on what we should be fighting for. That's why I'm here, because I want to figure that out. I see it, but I still can't diagnose it yet. But I see it.
And I think a lot of it, and this comes to some of what we were talking about with raising children without the big extended family here earlier before we even started. And it's this, we don't, in our modern society, and this is true, across the country, we don't have these large extended families usually anymore in places. I think it, like you were saying, it's coming back to people want connection with each other and with something that's substantial, not just an object like an iPhone. And I whatever we can do, I think, to build that will, I think, help alleviate some of that fear.
Yeah, and it's like they don't know how to get it, though. That's the thing. They know what they want, but they don't know how to get it. And people aren't connecting or interacting enough to ask. Or do you even know how to ask? Do you know what to ask for? I don't think enough of that happens.
I agree. I would say on my personal journey, I'm like learning, I'm walking through some of this process that you're talking about. So like, okay, so if I can frame this, I grew up on a reservation. I live here. I purposely left because there was not much for me. It was like 90% unemployment rate. You either were going to be murdered and missing, or you're going to be, sexually assaulted, as well as missing, or you're going to end up in prison, and the odds were not good. And so I consciously left. And through that, I was in my bubble living those experiences, and you're only taught what your parents know, and to get back to you on your generational trauma that you have, like, we're only taught what we know. And then, so when I came out of that bubble and I was, met all these people from all walks of life, I joined active duty Air Force in 2007, and it was a culture shock for me. I was like, wow, like these people have different of opinions, and it's not just natives and white people, it's like all these people. And so, my time outside the reservation and the environment, just different itself, has taught me a lot, right? It's taught me how to listen and learn and stuff. And then you get into relationships, and then you're like, I have been in my relationship with my husband for over 14 years. And he is African and white. And we have 2 kids together, and he and I have been healing together, a very conscious, like, asking, like, because we both come from families that hold this trauma, that don't know how to show up their authentic selves. And so now we're like, I'm unlearning at the same time learning what healthy relationships look like and what it means to feel joy and be at peace and not be stuck in a cycle of trauma, and then trying to meet and like feed like these emotions that are unsettled, or these experiences that are not complete or not healed. And so through this healing journey that I'm on, I have to ask what you're posing, Lisa, is like, I have to ask the questions of like, what does that look like to be in a relationship where you feel safe and you feel completely vulnerable and you feel, and you feel love? What is love, right? And then we get back to that word, and then you look it up in the dictionary because language is so disconnecting these days. And so then we go through all these like things, and then it's like the act of making space. Like we are like almost like redefining language while healing, while strengthening our connection. And by extension, like all of my connections that I hold are healing too. Like, like my mother and Cheryl and Amanda and whoever I have relationships with, even in this room, by extension of what I'm actively learning and I actively practice and live, it gets then reverberates through all my relationships. And I think that's exactly the path and journey that I'm on. And then I support others on as well. And I think that's really where we're talking about that the work comes down to this individual and this individual awareness and wanting to have better relationships, and then actively doing the work to have them. And then by extension, you then create a community of rooted in like positive healing environments that allow people to show up themselves, and then you're then able to then say, hey, like, how you treat me was wrong, or you're able to then put up these boundaries, and you're able to have these discussions, and you're able to cry together and laugh, and and I think that's where the beauty and like the peace and presence lie, is like being able to just walk in that with community and with each other, because then you have the love and you have the connections, and that's what people want but don't necessarily know how to get. Yeah.
Oh, yes. When y'all were talking, one of the things I was thinking about as y'all were sharing, and I'm pulling on little pieces of a lot of what everyone said, is we're experiencing an interesting moment in time. And I'm seeing this in different parts of the country as well. We're using words like community and we do not practice it, right? We're not actually in relationship with each other. When I hear Mama Gigi talk about these neighborhoods and communities, I'm like, I don't know what that is. We didn't see anything like that. We are living, one of the words that came up in one of the conversations was insular, right? Definitively, like, I only care about what's going on with me in my house. And that's not my business. I don't need to know my neighbor. I don't need to know your business. I don't want to talk to you. I don't want to be in relationship with you. But welcome to the community of Columbus, Ohio. How do you do that? Right? We are not even in practice about these things. This is why I had a stack of cards of like these words, just so we can look at what these words mean. One of the phrases that came up was erasure, right? Erasure. But it wasn't being used correctly, because definitively erasure speaks to a lot of these stories about like, this is what happens, right? Erasure is what Shelly talked about, right? Erasure is that unless Lisa sends these babies to Guadalajara, Jalisco, Mexico, they will have no idea what it means to have Aztec blood. They won't even know what that means, right? We have to give context for all of this, and it's complex and complicated if you have a wound in the generational trauma. Something hurt. And in some cases, the reason why folks didn't have as much of a sting is because They separated themselves. Like a part of what I heard in your story, Mama Gigi, is, oh, I don't know what's going on. We're good. And we have this version of our community here, especially not trying to figure out and force ourselves into spaces where they told us they don't want us there. Yeah. So I can form a community here. But I don't know if we really know in 2024 what it looks like to be in community with each other. And I'm hearing that in a lot of these stories about relationships. Like you're talking about a multi-generational household. And in a lot of spaces, you're the elder that people never get to interact with. We don't do them anymore. Particularly in the United States, it's like your kid almost turned 18. You're like, why do you still live here? You know, and you're out. So I really am interested in what it looks like to lovingly interrogate community, lovingly interrogate relationships. So what I want to do, I have a closeout question for the panel, but I'm not going to ask you it right now because I want you to have the very last word. But I am curious, and I want to give a few minutes to folks in the group, in our circle, in our fishbowl about, and this is my question for you, what are you learning about hearing their stories? What are you learning about hearing storytellers have power over their own stories? Where this often gets lost in history is storytellers don't have the power to tell their own story. Somebody told it for you. And then we changed it, right? We decided, no, that's not it. Like, Swin, when you were saying, like, that's not actually who invented, you know, that's not it. It was somebody else. Well, somebody got the patent. If you want to check in on this, go research the story of, you know, the song, you've seen Lion King? Right? You know, when Timon and Pumbaa are doing that cute little walk and they're singing Awimaway? That word was supposed to be Aim Mube. Mbube is what it was supposed to be, Mbube. When that song was discovered many, many, many moons ago, it was by a man named Solomon Linda. And no one knows he existed because folks just took it and reinvented it over and over and over and over again, and they erased him as if he didn't exist. Made millions, if not more. And they found out later there's an illiterate man who was a beautiful songstress who wrote the song, and nobody knew the story. This is what happens when storytellers do not get to tell their own story. This is what's important about this. So I'm asking you to be curious about what you're hearing and asking if there's anyone in the space to share out loud, because closed mouths don't get fed. And also your insight about thinking you were blessed by someone's story doesn't feed their belly if you just think it and walk home. So I'm hoping someone will ask for the microphone to share what are you learning about culture, community, relationships, and hearing their stories.
I just want to say, first of all, I'm overwhelmed. My mind is exploding because this is it's such a complex issue, right? You're looking at the diversity of what's happening, and then claiming culture is being an issue, right? Or is this really culture in what I'm living? I was listening to the Go to Affectionately Call You as well, Mama Gigi. And it so resonated with me hearing her stories because I got to be all over the place when I was a kid and in the hills of West Virginia, Bluefield, Welch, and Coalwood. And my step-grandparent worked in the coal mines back then. And to see, to hear your stories about the collect day, you used to go there, your doors would stay open and unlocked. And you just walk up and down the tar road and just walk into somebody's house, go make your peanut butter and jelly sandwich and just go back outside and play. So I had that until I got home. But when I came back to Columbus, Ohio, this trauma, abuse. So I think the point I wanted to make about this conversation, listen to everyone, is that the challenge I see is that there's the exposure issue, right? There's the taking the time to understand that you need to listen to somebody's story, right? They were talking, but it was hard for me to digest it because it took back home trauma. So that made it complex for me to hear people living in the hills of West Virginia who that's what they did, was sat on a porch and told their stories. And they were cool stories, really good stories, right? And I had the time of my life when I was there. And I was amazed that this is how Black folk live, right? And I came back to Columbus, Ohio, predominantly white. Dealing with integration at the time, I was one of the first to be bused to another school. And realizing then, wait a minute, something's not fair. Something's not right. I think it is important that you continue telling these stories. I think it is also equally important we figure out how to get our elders with the children. Because that's missing a huge deal. I'm almost tearing up about it because I'm working on a project, an intergenerational project. And it has been so difficult. And it has to get seniors to come out. And it has been their fears of just dealing with everyday life and talking to children. But the children, when they got together, was the most beautiful thing. And the questions that the kids asked was amazing. Yet some kids don't have questions to ask. And they ask better questions than we do as adults. So I just want to say, if anything that I take away from this is this opportunity and hope potential for us to get our elders to really commit to share these stories and create a conversation that needs to happen, not just peer conversations where sometimes, let's be real, the ignorant's talking to the ignorant, right? They need to hear the real of the stories. And one last thing I'm going to say, one discovery I made, I don't know how many of you ever been to the Whitney plantation, but that gentleman bought that property to do something totally different with until he found the files of slaves in the basement of a house where this woman meticulously kept record. And had he not discovered that when I went there, when they've heard of slavery, when you see the narratives, the true language and stories of the children in this thing, some of them are still alive when I went. They've since passed. But the fact you could hear their voice when they hear the story made a difference. And so that's why I'm going to encourage elders.
First, I want to say that hearing these stories are amazing. Being only 26, I'm still learning new things and hearing about my own history from my mom, my grandparents. I learned that recording everything is a big thing for my family because my grandparents getting older and their memory has been off and on. But as soon as I hear my grandparents speaking, I had to record something because I know that if I don't hear it or if I don't record it, that piece of history is now lost. And now a big thing, especially with my church, getting back to what you're saying about connecting the elders back with children. A big thing about my church is trying to sort of start over again. Not really start over, but trying to bring back old traditions that have been unlearned or haven't been fully learned, to where the newer generations are not being expected to do things or not being taught things that they should be expected to do. So I learned that having these recordings and hearing storytellers and hearing people tell their stories is such a big thing. And I'm really glad to hear that these stories were still being told. But I know that a hard thing, especially with technology, and people not being connected to technology still, even though we're in the 21st century, and people sharing things through technology has been such a hard thing, especially with understanding our past and using the past to learn about the future.
So what I learned was that found out that there was some cultures that they explained that were kind of, I don't know how to say it, but like we're kind of like giving up things, going to different countries, going to different worlds because of what was happening in those worlds. And I learned that all the cultures that were out, I learned that they had to run away from war because they knew that there was something going on, like slavery. There was a lot of that back then, and there was also a lot of what they said. There's a lot of people that sometimes just are still are getting mad because of the history that are still going on. So what I learned was that there was a lot of cultures that were dealing with some things that sometimes no one knew
and they're now dealing with it. So I think I learned some really inspirational things about different cultures, and now I'm good to go to school and share my friends.
Tell all of them.
Amazing. One of the things I wanted to share is that I came to Columbus in '95. I'm from Youngstown, Ohio, and I can remember someone mentioned just as far as the community that it was everybody did know everyone, and you can have a family taking up an entire block that wasn't Encino. But I think that one of the things that was lost of this idea that we had to live separate, or it was a shame to live multiples within a household and build and grow together. And when I moved here, it was hard to find community because everything was so far. There was so many freeways and so many schools that was separating, where it was just, it felt so big, even though it's still a small city. It felt so much bigger than where I was from. But I'm like looking at landmass, they're pretty much similar. But the spacing and the roads that separate us broke those communities. And I don't know how, but I show up. Literally, I'm at all types of events, meetings. I would love to partner with you because I know the elders having that connection. It's the babies and the elders, the people that are coming into the world and the people that are leaving out of this world need to be covered and protected in larger numbers because that having those small conversations with them allows for their mind to keep percolating, their muscle, the memory muscle of words and what happened and what they have overcome can be continued to be told over and over again. And we're just this, and I see it because as a birth worker, I'm in houses, I'm in with these families, and I see multiple generations where they just don't have that. They have a fast food storyline. They don't have the richness of a home cooked meal and what it tastes like and smelling meals all down the street. Everybody was home at a certain time cooking, and that filled you up. That gave you energy to be a child and appreciate something as you can smell what your neighbor was cooking. Like really, it's such a pleasure to know that somebody was at home being fed. The small things. So that's all I wanted to share. I appreciate y'all for doing things like this and for you sharing because you are our future. And for you to go back and share with your friends what you were able to take away from this is it's amazing. So I thank you for your knowledge and sharing.
Thank you. I just wanted to say that, I think a lot of us, are struggling with not only fear but truth. And like your story is your story, right? You're authentic and you know yourself. Nobody else really can know you but you. And so I think that there is a fear in hearing these stories because you put yourself in a vulnerable position when you're sharing who you are, right? And so that causes a fear response in a lot of people. And like it would be so great if we could treat each other that authentic, right? That authentic respect. In that, when a person shares their story, they are being vulnerable and it's the truth. There's, and so like back to that conversation about people should just get over their history. I mean, that's like who we are. That's what defines us, right? And so I think that there's this inherent vulnerability that is probably causing an inducement of that fear. Because about what it means to be vulnerable, taking the time to be vulnerable, taking the time to listen to people's authentic stories when everything around us is telling us, like, we don't have time for that. So I think that there's that emotional and, systematic pressure that's causing some of our inability to connect with each other. I was noticing like sort of this double-sided kind of relationship in terms of that notion of fear and the flock response, and also the fear and the fawn response in relation to language. You guys brought up language several times, right? And I feel like those people who maintain and gain power in this like sort of systemic ways through sort of the policing of language are doing it out of sort of this enforced standardization and this enforced way of speaking, right? That so that it's more difficult to tell our stories in ways that are authentic because you're shut down when we start to use our authentic voices. Like I'm an English professor, and this is how I sound in the classroom. But like if I'm at home, I'm like, like, why the slide is right? And I'm not gonna say that in the class because obviously, right? But like, so this, I feel like there should be, and then also like my parents they raised me to be like standard English, standard English, standard English, standard English. Got to use standard English. Nobody's gonna respect you. Cha 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 cha. Right? But what that does is it ends up erasing you or erases your identity, erases your authentic voice. Right, like I almost cried when you started talking because I was like, "Oh heck yes," and and I call myself 30, so like like Spanglish and squishing it words together and stuff was a thing there. And but the older generations were like, no, talk right, don't talk right. But now we've got these younger generations of kids coming up that are like reclaiming their identity, reclaiming their language, and no longer code switching, but code meshing, and bringing their voice into those places of power that have kept them out for so long. And so we've been taught to find and hide and erase ourselves inside of this standardized way of talking in service of this invisible weird, like, I don't know that fudge. And so I just was like really one just absolutely enthralled by your stories and really moved. And also, we're talking about language, we're talking about these like little bits and artifacts of your language, right? And I think my kids need the way they hear certain things because of the way you speak. That there's words like when I'm not gonna be like I'm not like that's just how they hear, that's what they hear. um how am I be quiet now, but I feel like it's important for us to try to go back and dig in and stop being afraid of our authentic voices, especially in places of power, and to bring our voice and our speech into those spaces so we can hear and respect each other more. So thank you. I'm just you need to wrap it up as well. No, you're good. Hi, everyone. I just wanted to thank everyone for speaking and sharing your stories, particularly because in the context of this reimagining Columbus, I'm not really sure how your stories will be cared for, right? What will be the result of having been wonderful to share them. So I'm honored to be in the audience here today. So thank you. And hearing your stories, one of the things that I think about is the way, and many of her sharing at least, so there's a sense of, there's a kind of forced ignorance within society. And it makes me think about the state legislature wanting to meddle with the kinds of things that are taught in your classrooms and how, that it contributes to a lack of community and the lack of, the word that I keep on thinking about is accountability and responsibility. And so, I and sharing just a small bit here that, my family is proud to have somebody on the roster of the Mayflower and having, Prussian background. And the thing that I've been mulling over the past, 20 or so years is I think that the peace statute to me is an opportunity to take responsibility for stolen land and for slavery, because they go hand in hand. And so I guess what I wanted to say with that is, the stories themselves aren't going to just fix things, right? There's power involved, like as you mentioned before. And I just hope that that more folks who have a legacy or a history here in the United States take responsibility for the debts that we have. And sort of one last thing that I'll mention and thinking about this is, I live near Whetstone High School. And as maybe some of you know, their mascot is an Indian hen. They're called the Braves. And, for years I've been riding my bike past their football fields and what have you. And there has traditionally been this huge, racist picture of an Indian man with headdress. And it's gone now. And so what that leaves me thinking about is it's gone, but what about the facts you see here? So we move the Columbus statue, we take it down and put it somewhere else, we rename it or put up another statue. But, I'm just really curious about how the story is going to evolve into accountability. And, the Indian figure is gone. George Floyd's name is now gone from a ticker tape around downtown. And the uprisings of 2020 were part of the reasons that we came to this conversation about the Columbus statue, right? So I guess I just want to share that and hope that, just want to say that I'm really hungry for an opportunity to be accountable.
All right. I think we are close to the time, and I want you to tell everybody in the family that I was on time. You make sure you go back and tell them all I was on time. Okay. Because thank you, because I was even born late. So if we could, yeah, okay. So lots of thoughts, but I want to give y'all the last word, and then I'll give you back your day, your time. I had all kinds of potential questions that I wanted to give you for the checkout. And then I remembered something that came up, and I thought maybe this would be a beautiful way of doing a lot of what the audience talked about when they were in conversation with you about your stories and how your stories are impacting them. And that is authenticity, the beauty of our voices, the complexity, the messiness of being truthful about things. And one of the words that has come up in some conversations has been colorblind. And we know in certain spaces that's actually not a good thing. It's a problematic thing. But when you don't have multi-generational conversations, when you don't have multicultural conversations, you don't know that is actually problematic. Because what colorblind speaks to is, I don't see the things that make you different. I just see you're just we're just all blobs of flesh in the chair, vibing with each other. And I don't notice anything different about you. When in fact, what I heard in your stories is, I want you to see every single thing that is unique about me. So what I would like for us to do in maybe not closing the story, but pausing the story. And I implore all of us to make sure that you have a conversation with someone and see what it looks like to develop a relationship, to listen to someone else, right? How we interrupt insular behavior is by caring about somebody else's story and when we're in conversation with each other, the pause, you don't talk because they paused, right? Because then you're just waiting to speak, but we're actually actively listening and sharing space and energy with other human beings. What I would like for you to share on our way to pause this conversation until we have more is, instead of practicing color blindness, what all would you like people to see when they see you and your culture in community? If I bump into you in community and you were unabashedly bold about all the culture, no change for you, Mama Gigi. I'm just kidding. If you're just unabashedly bold about, this is who I am, and I don't want you to not see this, right? If you're seeing me, I want you to notice I'm bald. I don't have any issue with being bald. I have no issue with being tattooed. I have no issue with being pierced. I have no issue with any of the things I'm coming into the space with. And in fact, I want you to see all of this because I did all this on purpose, right? I would like for when you close out, say your name and say what you want people to see when they see you. So I would say, my name is Kimberly Brazwell. And when you see me in community, I want you to see that I am. Yes. All right. We can popcorn this out. So whoever wants to start first, you can go.
Okay. I am Takoni Koki Fishi. My government name is Shelly Corbin, and I would like to leave you with, when you come and share space with me, is that I really approach it from a space of healing, of just living life and creating and moving through the emotions. And emotions are so powerful, negative or positive. And that when we do that in relation to someone else, because you can't heal alone, you have to heal in community, and experience life in community, is that you get the opportunity to make memory, like through emotions. And so the more emotions that you get to experience, especially positive emotions, is the more memory that you get to build. And that memory is generational memory. So actively, while I'm healing and in the space that I'm healing, I'm feeling new feelings repetitively, that it's memory, and it's memory in my DNA. And through that, ultimately, know that when we're in space and community, I'm looking to literally speak into existence what the future is going to bring, what it's going to bring, what I'm going to create for my children and for their children and for their children for thousands of years. I prayed for my children. I pray for their partners. I pray for everybody who interacts with my children, who will love my children. And I pray for everybody in the future, because I know, because of my ancestors and that I exist today, that that's the power that we have as human beings, as spirits in this body. And so that's what I do, is I pray and I sing that into existence, is the future. And so know that when you see me, that's what we'll be doing together.
First off, thank you everybody for taking the time to listen. It's been an honor to be here. Thank you for sharing your stories. It's been an honor to dialogue with you. I appreciate that. And thank you for putting this together. And this was a very eye-opening experience. It served its purpose. With that said, my name is Lisa. And when people see me, my name is Lisa Marie, which is my whole first name, Rojas. And when people see me, I want them to see transparency, and that I absolutely positively, no matter what I say, no matter what I do, I mean no harm. If I did, you have to let me know so I can make it right. I mean no harm.
One thing about this panel this whole evening is a reminder that all of us, you have no idea what's going on in somebody's life. You really have no idea what their background is. And that could be somebody who is a complete stranger that you just had a transaction with at a coffee house, or somebody you've known for all your life and you still don't know everything. So there's a lot of layers for all of us. And for me, I guess it's, my name is Marc, and Marc Conte, Marc Vincent Conte. And I do value honesty, and I want people to know that I am a product of my time and my upbringing. I am trying to learn more, and I am trying to be more understanding.
Do you want to go, Mama G? Okay. Okay. In closing, my full government name, I am Catherine Ann Elizabeth Swidarski. I go by Swid, though, please. When you bump into me in community, please call me Swid. And I want people to know that I am kaleidoscopic. So if I take off my invisible backpack, all that privilege that I carry. I know it, I am aware of it, and I am open. I want to be in community with you. So I want you to know that I care deeply and I am here for you. And I am kaleidoscopic.
If you could put this in.
We're going to talk about it after you.
Okay.
You can use it if you want, though.
Yeah, well, if I
You
know
can
what
be
it
that
meant,
too.
If I knew what it meant. Okay. Well, my name is Gwendolyn Gardener, and I'm honored to be called Mama Gigi because there's an expectation when they call you that you have to, you have to be authentic in what you say and consistent in what you say. I want to continue.
I'm so sorry. All of
See how they love me. They take care of me.
That's right.
And things in my mind is so much. I've been here for a while, so I've seen a lot of things. But I try to live authentically Black or African American or who we are. I have a lot of respect for generational living. I've benefited from that. I want to be honest. I wanted to be truthful. Um, I say a lot of things to make a point, but that's not always who I am. I was getting you to think about what you're doing. We're all the same, really. We got the same situations. People came from wherever they came. They came here for a reason or to get away from something or to grow at something. So I'd like to leave with all of us live in the spirit of our ancestors and respect that, because if they hadn't done what they have done, we wouldn't be here today. And we have to honor that and know your history. Really, really, really know your history. Don't play with it. It's serious. And pay attention to your spirit. It tells you everything to do. And when you try to orchestrate it, you get in trouble. But if you follow it, and sit down and be quiet sometimes and listen to it, you'll be all right. So I live by that. I'm not religious, but I'm spiritual. Um, I think they're two different things. I have respect for however you do it, but I have a lot of respect for spirit, because when we go back to our history of being African Americans, that's how we survive, is by the spirit.
Wow. It is that time. I don't have any church announcements. Thank you so much for coming. My name is Kimberly Brazwell. I am humbled and honored to have shared space with you. Every part of my lineage honors and thanks every part of your lineage. Thank you for being here. Thank you for showing up. Thank you for bringing the people into the space. I feel very emotional right now. Thank you for your willingness to practice in front of other people what we are behaving badly doing in community and saying we can't do. We just did it. And if we would do this over and over again, we might not harm each other as much as we're harming each other. We're whole people that are descendants of whole people. And we need to do a much better job of being our ancestors' wildest dreams. Thank you for coming.